Chapter 1. Born by the Fjord. You were not born into greatness. You were born beside a cold Norwegian fjord, where the sea decided every family's future. Your father not a famous warrior or a king, but something just as important, a shipbuilder. For every Viking longship that left your village carried the work of his hands, and raiders, traders, explorers, and fishermen all trusted ships like his with their lives. So from the day you could walk, the smell of fresh pine, oak, and tar filled your world. Unlike other boys, your playground wasn't the training field, but the shipyard. While your friends dreamed of carrying swords, you spent hours watching axes shape massive oak trunks into elegant curves, every strike seeming magical, every plank slowly becoming part of something much bigger than itself. Your father rarely explained his work, instead expecting you to watch, saying wood speaks, and that if you learned to listen, every tree would tell you what it wanted to become. At first those words made no sense, but years later you would realize they contained the greatest lesson of your life. The forest supplied everything as towering oak trees became keels, tall pines became masts, ash trees became oars. Nothing was wasted, even small branches finding new purposes inside the village. To a Viking, the forest wasn't just nature but survival. Every evening the village gathered beside the harbor as ships returned loaded with fish, furs, iron, amber, and stories from distant lands, some sailors speaking of England, others describing Iceland, a few even whispering about mysterious western islands beyond the sea, those stories filling your imagination. Your mother worked just as hard as your father, spinning wool into cloth for sails because without strong sails, even the finest ship could never cross the sea. And you slowly realized that every successful voyage depended on an entire village, not just the men who sailed. Winter changed everything as the sea froze. Shipbuilding slowed. Families gathered inside warm wooden homes, and old storytellers filled the evenings with tales of Odin, Thor, and legendary explorers whose ships conquered impossible oceans, those stories planting dreams inside your young mind. As spring returned, so did the sound of axes, the shipyard becoming alive once again as logs arrived from the mountains. Blacksmiths forged iron rivets, carpenters sharpened tools, and the entire village prepared for another season of building. One morning your father finally handed you your first tool, not a sword, not a shield, but a carving knife, its wooden handle worn smooth from years of use. And he said, "This will shape your future." You, holding it carefully, feeling it heavier than any weapon. Your first task seemed simple, smooth a rough piece of wood, but hours later your hands ached and the wood still looked uneven. Shipbuilding demanding patience more than strength, every mistake remaining visible forever. You made mistakes every day. Sometimes the wood cracked, sometimes measurements failed. Sometimes your father quietly started over without saying a word, never shouting, because every great shipbuilder began exactly where you stood. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, you looked across the unfinished longship resting beside the fjord, realizing it wasn't just a pile of timber anymore but becoming something alive. And you knew that one day ships built by your own hands would cross unknown seas. But first you had to become an apprentice. Chapter 2. Learning the Craft. 3 years have passed since your father placed a carving knife into your hands, and now you are no longer simply watching but expected to work before sunrise each morning. The shipyard is already alive. The smell of fresh-cut timber mixing with the smoke from the blacksmith's forge, hammers ringing through the cold air while sawdust covers the ground beneath your boots. Every craftsman knowing exactly what needs to be done. Today you are no longer a child wandering through the shipyard, but an apprentice. Your first lesson surprises you as you don't build ships but clean the workshop. Axes must stay sharp, chisels must stay organized, wood shavings must be cleared, every tool having its place. Your father explaining that a careless workshop creates careless ships, discipline coming before craftsmanship. Soon your father teaches you the most important skill of all, choosing the right tree, not every oak deserving to become a ship. Some trees too young, others with hidden cracks. The strongest trees growing slowly, wind shaping them, snow strengthening them, the forest deciding which trees will one day sail across oceans. The villagers never cut trees carelessly as every tree is respected, many believing forest spirits protect the woodland. Before cutting a great oak, your father quietly thanking nature for its gift. To outsiders it may seem strange, but to Vikings respect for nature means survival. Back at the shipyard another lesson begins as wood cannot simply be nailed together. Every plank must bend naturally. If forced too quickly, it snaps. Steam softening the timber, heat changing its shape. Slowly the ship beginning to take form. The blacksmith works beside the builders as iron rivets are heated until they glow orange. Each rivet must fit perfectly. Without them, the ship would fall apart during storms. Watching every craftsman work together, you begin understanding something important. A great ship is never built by one person. Not every day is exciting, as sometimes you spend hours smoothing a single plank, sometimes carving pegs that nobody will ever notice. The smallest details often taking the longest, your father smiling and saying, "The sea notices everything." As weeks become months, your hands change, as blisters become calluses. Your shoulders grow stronger, your movements more confident. Without realizing it, your body begins learning the rhythm of shipbuilding. Wood no longer feeling unfamiliar but alive. One afternoon, traders arrive from Denmark, their ship needing repairs before continuing its journey. As you help replace damaged planks, they tell stories about distant ports, England, Francia, the Baltic Sea, and you realize the ships built here travel farther than most people ever will. That evening, your father asks a simple question. What is the strongest part of a ship? You answer confidently, the keel. But he shakes his head saying, the builder, because every decision you make determines whether families return home safely. For the first time, you understand the true weight of this craft. The village slowly begins trusting you with more responsibility as neighbors ask for help repairing fishing boats. Children watch you work the same way you once watched your father. Without noticing, you are becoming part of the next generation of shipbuilders. Late one evening, you run your hand across the smooth hull of the nearly completed Longship, this time recognizing your own work, the plank beneath your fingers shaped by you, the rivets beside it placed with your hands. You are no longer simply learning, but helping create ships that may one day carry explorers into the unknown. But before you can build your own ship, you must first learn to choose the perfect tree. Chapter 3. Choosing the Sacred Oak. You are 18 now, no longer the curious boy wandering through the shipyard, no longer the apprentice who simply followed instructions. For the first time, your father gives you a responsibility that could determine the fate of an entire ship. Choose the timber. Only a few words, but every master shipbuilder knows those words carry enormous weight. One mistake in the forest could doom dozens of sailors years later. Today, the decision is yours. Before sunrise, you leave the village with several experienced woodsmen. The forest quiet with only birds and flowing streams breaking the silence. No one rushing because finding the right tree cannot be hurried. The forest deciding who succeeds, not the builder. Your father teaches you to ignore the tallest trees as height means very little. Strength hiding inside the grain. You kneeling beside several ancient oaks, running your fingers across rough bark, feeling every curve, every knot, every scar left by decades of wind. An old shipbuilder quietly points toward a naturally curved oak, saying, "This one." At first you don't understand. Then he smiles, explaining that nature has already shaped part of the ship, the curved trunk becoming the bowstrong flexible, perfect, sometimes the forest doing half the work. Before the first axe strikes the tree, everyone becomes silent, some villagers quietly thanking the spirits of the forest, others bowing their heads. Whether tradition or belief, every craftsman understanding one thing: respect the forest, because without it there are no ships. The chopping begins as axes strike together again and again, wood chips flying through the air, the sound echoing across the valley. Hours later the giant finally falls, and the ground shakes beneath your feet. The hardest part comes next, as moving the timber requires dozens of villagers working together with oxen pulling, men pushing, women preparing food and water for the workers, teenagers clearing the path, children watching in amazement. Building a ship beginning long before the first plank is carved. Back at the shipyard, the timber rests for days because fresh wood holds too much moisture. Your father explaining that patience creates stronger ships. Good builders never rushing the process. Time becoming another tool. Now the shaping begins with the keel, the backbone of every Viking ship. If the keel fails, everything fails, you carefully marking every cut using charcoal. Every measurement perfect because there are no second chances. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. The ship slowly appearing not through magic, but through thousands of careful decisions, each plank fitting tightly beside the next, each rivet strengthening the hull. You beginning to see the ship hidden inside every tree. One evening your father places his hand on the keel, then looks at you saying, "You chose well." Those 3 words meaning more than any celebration. For the first time, a master shipbuilder approving of your judgment, not your strength, not your speed, but your wisdom. As darkness settles across the fjord, you stand beside the growing Longship. Months ago, it was only an ancient oak deep inside the forest. Now it is becoming something extraordinary. Soon it will carry warriors, merchants, families, perhaps even explorers searching for lands no Viking has ever seen. And this is only the beginning. The true challenge, building an entire Longship, still lies ahead. Chapter 4. Building the Longship. You are 21 years old, years of practice having transformed you from an apprentice into a trusted shipbuilder. When one cold spring morning the village chief approaches your father with an important request. A new Longship is needed, larger than any your village has built before. It will carry warriors, merchants, and explorers across dangerous seas. And for the first time your father turns toward you saying, "This one you will lead," the responsibility feeling heavier than any axe you have ever lifted. Everything begins with the keel, the backbone of the ship. If it is perfectly straight, the ship will glide across the sea. If it bends even slightly, the ocean will expose every mistake. So you spend the entire day measuring the massive oak beam again and again because perfection cannot be rushed. Next come the ribs, each curved beam giving the ship its strength. One by one they rise from the keel like the bones of a great sea creature. Slowly the shape of the Longship begins to appear, and for the first time you can imagine it sailing. Now the real challenge begins. The outer planks. Unlike most ships, Viking longships using overlapping planks, each board overlapping the next like the scales of a fish, this method making the ship lighter, stronger, and flexible enough to survive violent waves. Every plank must fit perfectly. Inside the forge another team works tirelessly as blacksmiths heat iron until it glows bright orange. Thousands of rivets holding the ship together, each one hammered by hand, one mistake, one weak rivet, potentially costing dozens of lives during a storm. As the hull grows larger, the village grows busier. Women weaving enormous wool sails, children gathering pine resin, elders preparing tar made from pine roots. Nothing wasted, every person contributing. Building a Longship, never the work of one craftsman, but belonging to the entire community. Weeks become months as rain slows the work, and strong winds test the unfinished hull. You inspecting every joint, every plank, every rivet, every beam. The sea accepting no shortcuts, and neither do you. Then comes your favorite part, carving the dragon's head, some believing it frightens evil spirits. Others believing it terrifies enemies before battle even begins. Whether legend or truth, the dragon becoming the symbol of every great Viking ship, every careful cut bringing it to life. The mast rises high above the shipyard as dozens of villagers pull together using thick ropes. Slowly the towering pine mast stands upright, cheers echoing across the harbor. Without a mast the ship cannot chase the wind. Today it finally can. Your father walks silently around the nearly completed ship, running his hand across the smooth wooden hull, studying every joint, every rivet, every curve, finally nodding without a word, the highest praise he has ever given you. As the final sail is attached, you step back for the first time. It is magnificent, long, fast, elegant. Strong months of labor becoming something extraordinary, a vessel capable of carrying dreams across the sea. That evening, the setting sun reflects across the polished wooden hull as children point toward the dragon prow. Sailors admire the craftsmanship. The village chief smiles with pride. And you know that tomorrow the ship will meet the sea for the very first time. Only then will you discover whether your work is truly worthy of the Vikings. Chapter 5. Forging the Dragon Ship. Months of hard work have finally come to an end as the dragon-headed Longship stands proudly beside the fjord, its polished oak hull shining beneath the morning sun. The carved dragon watching over the village as if it has always belonged there. Today, unlike any other day, because today the ship leaves the land, and for every shipbuilder, this is the moment of truth. The sea will decide whether your craftsmanship deserves to be remembered. Before anyone touches the ship, the village gathers for a blessing as the elder offers thanks to the gods for the timber, the iron, and the hands that built the vessel, families bowing their heads, children watching quietly, even the strongest warriors remaining silent. Every voyage beginning with hope. Thick wooden rollers are placed beneath the hull, heavy ropes tied along the sides, dozens of villagers taking their positions. This ship weighing several tons, moving it requiring the strength of the entire community, no one left standing idle. The signal is given, pull. The ropes tighten, the ship barely moves. Then slowly the giant begins sliding forward, wood creaking, rollers turning, cheers spreading across the shoreline as months of work finally begin moving toward the sea. The bow reaches the water first as small waves touch the polished oak. For a brief moment everyone holds their breath, wondering if the ship will float or hidden mistakes reveal themselves. The hull settling gently into the fjord, perfectly balanced. A wave of relief sweeping across the harbor. Now comes the first inspection as you step aboard carefully. Every plank checked, every rivet examined. No leaks, no cracks, no strange sounds. The ship feeling solid beneath your feet exactly as you imagined. The crew climbs aboard as experienced sailors raise the square sail, the wind catching the wool cloth, the ropes tightening, the mast bending slightly. Then the dragon ship begins moving across the fjord, your creation alive. The captain turns the ship into stronger winds as the waves grow larger, the hull rising and falling smoothly instead of fighting the sea. The ship moves with it, exactly as your father taught you. A good ship never battles the ocean but works together with it. By afternoon the ship returns safely as the sailors cannot stop smiling, praising its speed, balance, and strength. One experienced captain telling you something you will never forget. This ship could cross the world. That evening the village celebrates with long tables filling the harbor. Fresh fish, roasted lamb, bread, ale, music echoing between the mountains, children laughing, families dancing, everyone together. As darkness falls, your father walks beside you, looking toward the ship floating peacefully beneath the moonlight, saying quietly, "I built many ships, but this one people will remember." And for the first time in your life you believe him. Before sunrise the next morning the dragon ship disappears beyond the horizon, carrying warriors, merchants, dreams, and a small piece of you. Every wave it crosses supported by your hands. Every distant shore it reaches telling the story of your craftsmanship. But greater challenges still await. Soon even kings will hear your name. Chapter 6. Launching the Longship. Years have passed since your first longship touched the sea, its success spreading far beyond your village as merchants praised its speed, warriors admired its strength, and even distant settlements began asking one question: who built that ship? One crisp autumn morning, a group of mounted warriors arrives at your shipyard, their shields painted with the symbol of a powerful Norse chieftain. And they have not come to buy a ship, but have come looking for you. The messenger steps forward saying, their lord requires a new flagship, not just another vessel, but the finest longship ever built, a ship worthy of leading fleets across the North Sea, one that will carry warriors into battle and bring them safely home again. You accept without hesitation. Then the weight of the responsibility settles upon your shoulders. Building an ordinary ship is difficult, but building a chieftain's flagship is something entirely different, where every plank must be flawless, every rivet perfectly placed, every carving worthy of a king. Failure not an option because your reputation now sails with every ship you build. The search for timber begins once more, but this time you reject dozens of magnificent oaks, choosing only the strongest, straightest, oldest trees to become the flagship, the forest becoming your greatest teacher, and now you understand its language. Back at the shipyard, the work never stops as blacksmiths forge stronger rivets than ever before. Carvers shape magnificent dragon heads. Women weave the largest sail the village has ever produced. Children carry water, elders sharpen tools. Every member of the village sharing the same goal, to build something unforgettable. Weeks become months as the flagship slowly rises above the shipyard. Its hull longer, its beam wider, its mast towering over every nearby building. Travelers stopping simply to admire it. Some whispering, it looks more like a sea dragon than a ship, and you quietly smile because that was exactly your intention. The dragon's head becomes your masterpiece as you spend days carving every scale, every tooth, every eye. Not simply decoration, but a warning. Long before the ship reaches shore, its enemies will know exactly who is coming. As completion nears, the chieftain arrives to inspect the ship, the village falling silent as he slowly walks around the hull, running his hand across the polished oak, examining every carving, every rivet, every beam, minutes feeling like hours. Then he smiles and says, "The finest ship I have ever seen." Those words spreading through the village before sunset. Neighbors congratulating you, children pointing proudly toward the harbor, your father saying nothing but placing his hand on your shoulder. Sometimes silence saying everything. Launch day arrives once again as hundreds gather beside the fjord. Warriors in polished helmets, families dressed for celebration, merchants from neighboring villages, even distant visitors arriving to witness the launch of the great flagship, your work now known throughout the region. The ship slides gracefully into the water as not a single plank shifts, not a single rivet loosens. It floats exactly as you intended. The chieftain climbs aboard. The great sail rises. The dragon ship catches the wind and begins sailing toward the open sea. As the flagship disappears beyond the horizon, you remain standing on the shoreline. Years ago, you dreamed of building ships. Today, kings trust your hands. Your name now spoken in villages you've never visited. But one thought stays with you. A shipbuilder is never remembered for one great ship, but for every life his ships carry safely home. And that will become your greatest legacy. Chapter 7. The King's Commission. For more than 20 years you have built ships for other people. Warriors trusting them, merchants sailing them, explorers crossing distant seas aboard them. Yet one question has always remained. How do your ships truly feel beneath the open ocean? When a trading expedition prepares to sail west, the captain offers you a place aboard, saying, "If anyone deserves to sail this ship, it's the man who built her," and for the first time in your life you leave the shipyard behind. The shoreline slowly disappears behind you as the familiar mountains become smaller with every passing hour. Soon only endless sea surrounding the ship, the gentle rocking beneath your feet, feeling different than expected. You built this vessel and now you finally understand how alive it truly is. The captain teaches you lessons no workshop ever could. A ship is never still, every wave twisting the hull, every gust of wind testing the mast, every creak telling an experienced sailor something important. You begin listening carefully, the wood speaking again, just as your father promised years ago. 3 days later, dark clouds gather across the horizon as the wind changes, the crew moving quickly. The square sail lowered, loose cargo secured. No one panicking because storms are simply another part of life at sea. The storm arrives with incredible force as towering waves crash against the hull, rain blinding the crew, thunder shaking the sky. You gripping the railing tightly as every plank flexes and every rivet groans. But the ship holds, not because of luck, but because it was built correctly. By sunrise, the sea becomes calm once again as the crew begins inspecting the ship, finding no broken ribs, no leaking hull, no damaged mast. The captain smiling and saying, "You trusted your hands, now trust your work." And for the first time, you truly believe your father was right. Several days later, land appears as a busy trading port welcomes ships from many lands. Merchants speaking unfamiliar languages, colorful fabrics, glass beads, silver coins, fine pottery. Goods from distant kingdoms filling the marketplace. Your ship carrying everyone here safely. As local craftsmen inspect your ship, they stop beside the overlapping planks, running their hands across the hull, one smiling with admiration, having never seen a vessel built this way. Without speaking the same language, you understand each other perfectly, because great craftsmanship needs no translation. During the return voyage, you make notes of small improvements, a stronger mast fitting, better drainage, wider storage space, every journey teaching something new. Even masters continuing to learn, perhaps especially masters. When your village finally appears on the horizon, children race toward the harbor, families waving from the shoreline, your wife smiling with relief, your aging father waiting quietly beside the shipyard, asking only one question. Did she sail well? You simply nodding and saying, "Better than I ever imagined." That evening you gather every apprentice in the workshop. Instead of teaching them how to build ships, you teach them why ships survive. Not because wood is strong, not because iron is hard, but because every small decision matters. Great ships built long before they ever touch the sea. As night falls over the fjord, you stand beside your workshop once again, the sea having answered every question you carried for years. Your ships no longer just beautiful but proven, having survived storms, crossed distant waters, and returned home safely. And soon, your greatest challenge will no longer be building ships, but teaching others to build them after you are gone. Chapter 8. Legacy Across the Sea. Nearly 3 decades have passed since you first picked up a carving knife, and the small shipyard where you once swept wood shavings has changed beyond recognition. Several longships now rest beside the harbor. New workshops stand where empty ground once existed. Young apprentices fill the air with the sound of axes and laughter. For the first time, you are no longer the youngest craftsman, but the master everyone watches. Your father has grown old, his hands no longer shaping timber the way they once did. Instead, he quietly watches you teach, sometimes smiling, sometimes nodding, the student becoming the master and the master becoming the teacher. Every apprentice wants to learn quickly, but you stop them, saying, "A fast shipbuilder builds dangerous ships," teaching patience before skill, respect before confidence, observation before action, exactly as your own father taught you many years ago. Each morning begins the same way, not with axes or hammers, but with questions. Why does this plank bend? Why does this oak split? Why does one ship survive storms while another breaks apart? You encouraging every apprentice to think, not simply copy. Your workshop has become famous as travelers arrive from distant villages, some seeking repairs, others hoping to buy ships, many simply wishing to watch your craftsmen work. Your reputation now traveling farther than your ships ever could. One afternoon, a young apprentice ruins an expensive oak plank, lowering his head in shame, the entire workshop becoming silent. But instead of becoming angry, you hand him another piece of timber, saying, "Every master has made this mistake." And the workshop breathes again because fear never creates great craftsmen. Your wife continues leading the women who weave sails, their work becoming just as respected as the shipbuilders, because without strong sails, even the finest longship remains trapped beside the shore, the village understanding that every craft depends upon another. One evening, children gather beside the unfinished hull, asking endless questions about how the ship floats, why the dragon is carved at the front, how far it can travel. You answering every question with a smile because curiosity built every great civilization. As another ship is completed, you no longer think about praise but about safety. Will the crew return home? Will families welcome them again? The greatest compliment, no longer admiration, but seeing every sailor step safely back onto the dock. One evening, your oldest apprentice presents you with a finished boat he built almost entirely by himself. You walking around it carefully, checking every plank, every rivet, every curve. Then you smile because the next generation is ready. Your father quietly joins you beside the harbor, as together you watch another longship disappear beyond the horizon. Years ago he stood here watching you. Now you stand here watching your apprentices, the circle complete. As darkness settles over the village, the sound of axes slowly fades as your apprentices lock away their tools, the shipyard becoming quiet once more. And looking across the harbor, you realize something important. Ships may carry warriors across oceans, but knowledge carries civilizations across generations. And soon your greatest masterpiece will not be made of oak, but the people you have taught. Chapter 9. Master of the Fjord. More than 40 years have passed since your father first placed a carving knife into your hands, and the young boy who once watched others build ships has become the oldest craftsman in the village. Your hands slower now, the scars remaining, the calluses still there, every mark telling the story of a ship, every wrinkle reminding you of another winter spent beside the fjord. The workshop louder than ever. But now you spend more time watching than working, and strangely, you enjoy it. Your apprentices have become masters, their apprentices now filling the workshops. Some building fishing boats, others merchant ships, a few even building mighty dragon ships larger than anything you imagined in your youth. And they no longer ask how to swing an axe, but why your ships lasted longer than anyone else's. You smiling because the answer was never hidden inside the wood but inside patience. One afternoon a messenger returns from a distant voyage telling stories of your ships sailing across icy northern seas, trading in busy foreign ports, crossing dangerous storms, and always finding their way home. Some captains still speaking your name, not because they know you, but because they trust ships built by your workshop. And that is the greatest honor a craftsman can receive. You visit the forest once again, not to cut timber, but simply to walk. The ancient oaks standing where they always have. Some of the trees you admired as a boy still reaching toward the sky while others became ships many years ago. You gently placing your hand upon one great oak, reminded of your father's words that wood speaks. And now you finally understand everything he meant. Back at the harbor, another magnificent longship is ready to launch. This time, built not by you, but by your oldest apprentice, who invites you to inspect the vessel. You slowly walking around the hull, every plank fitting perfectly, every rivet secure, the dragon's head carved with incredible skill. And you nod with quiet pride knowing the tradition is safe. Launch day feels different now as you stand among the crowd instead of leading it. Children waving excitedly, women singing traditional songs, warriors preparing their shields, the great ship sliding gracefully into the fjord, the crowd cheering while you remain silent, watching another generation continue the work. That evening, your family gathers inside the longhouse as grandchildren climb onto your lap asking about dragons, storms, foreign lands, and the first ship you ever built. You telling every story with the same excitement you felt decades ago because memories, like ships, become stronger each time they are shared. The following spring, you no longer carry heavy timber, instead handing your old carving knife to a young apprentice, the wooden handle worn smooth after decades of use exactly as it was when your father gave it to you. The boy staring with wide eyes as you smile, the journey beginning again. Standing beside the harbor, you count the ships. 1, 5, 10, too many to remember, each one carrying a piece of your life's work. Some traveling east, others sailing west, many never returning, but every voyage beginning with the same hope of safe seas and a safe homecoming. As another summer ends, you realize something unexpected. People no longer introduce you by your name. They simply say, "He built the ships." Nothing more needed. Your work becoming your identity, and somehow that feels right. One quiet evening, you sit alone beside the fjord as the water is calm, the mountains unchanged. The sea still whispering against the shore just as it did when you were a little boy. You closing your eyes and for a moment almost hearing your father's voice saying, "Listen carefully. The wood is speaking," and you smile because it never stopped. Years from now, the storms will wear away the wood, the sails will eventually rot, even the greatest ships will one day disappear beneath the sea, but craftsmanship, knowledge, and the lessons passed from one generation to the next can never sink. You were never remembered because you sailed the farthest or fought the hardest. You were remembered because thousands of people crossed the sea safely aboard ships built by your hands. And that is the true legacy of a Viking shipbuilder.